Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Gretchen Anthony, who is a fiction writer. And for people who are not familiar with your writing, Gretchen, could you explain exactly what types of fiction that you write?
Yeah. Yeah, I people like to describe my work as humor with heart because I tend to write comedy. My philosophy in life is if you're not laughing, it's you're crying sometimes, and especially these days and when everything feels so dark and so heavy, we need a little escapism. We need a little bit of light in our lives. So, yeah, that's what I write. My books tend to be popular with book clubs. They patch me in with women's fiction, but I don't know if I like that because they really do apply to yeah, they're gender neutral, but yeah, mostly comedy. I like to say that.
Okay, sounds great. So, what can readers expect from your latest book?
So my latest book is Tired Ladies Take a Stand, and it really is this one, again, like the others, is humorous, but at its heart, it is a story of friendship and the power of women's friendships. Um, and just what a pillar they serve to us in our lives. The plot is that there's a group of four friends at two different phases in their lives. In their late 20s, takes place in San Francisco, and they're all getting their careers under them, and they have all gone through significant breakups recently, and they meet up as friends in their, the kind of the height of their lives in a wonderful city, and they decide to make a pact to say yes for an entire year. Yes to adventure. Yes to saying, taking on new challenges at work. Yes, yes to everything. Yes to their social lives. And they have a phenomenal year. They do everything from, sleeping in wineries to having tea parties in used wedding dresses. There's a whole story behind that. There's a game that they play at the bars called Buy Me a Drink Bingo. And so this philosophy of theirs and the friendship carries on for decades. And then you flash forward to when they're in their late middle age, maybe their 50s, like me, and they realize just how toxic and draining it is to say yes to everything. We're overburdened with everything, and a lot of it is stuff that we've taken on ourselves. And so they decide, after a few mishaps, to have a year of no. They completely turn their philosophy on its head, and in the process they realize just how difficult it is to learn how to say no to things and how terrible we are at it in some ways. And with all my books, hijinks ensue. And But the friendship really is at the heart of the book. And one of the things that I love about this book is that it was loosely based, all of the characters and the events in the book were loosely based on my best friends back in our 20s when we did all meet each other and were fresh in our careers in San Francisco. And then, now in our 50s when we're still friends and we're still battling, the ups and downs of life together. We text each other many times a day. We laugh together. We tell each other to knock it off. You're taking too much stuff on. And so the characters, not only are very personal, to me, but I feel readers have told me that they are very relatable. They read like people that they know, that friends of their own, or, so that makes me that thrills me because I, these are wonderful people, and I'm glad that I was able to translate them into wonderful, enjoyable characters.
So, is that what you think draws readers to these books? That people relate to your characters very well?
I hope so. I mean, I think my books tend to be those books that spread by word of mouth. I never get huge press. I never, um, I'm never going to have 12 to 24,000 reviews on Amazon. I mean, unless, not yet. Hasn't happened yet. Let's put it that way. But they
All
do
right,
just spread by
listeners,
word
do
of
it.
mouth. Yes, please do it. But they spread by word of mouth, and especially with book clubs. Somebody in the book club hears about it. They hear that it's light. It's not going to drag them down. I aim to leave readers feeling better when they're done with the book than when they started the book. And so uh yeah, that's that I would say that's what I'm known for, and that's what I hope for. I'm not I mean, the plots are there, and they're thick and there are twists and all that stuff, but really it's the people in the book, the characters in the book that I think sets me apart. Yeah.
It's funny because I have a lot of friends from when I was really young, and I've been talking to a number of people, and they say, "How can you have friends from when you were so young and still have them as friends?"
Yeah.
And it's kind of unusual, but what you're saying is that people have contacted you and saying that they've had friends from way, way back, and they're still
Yes.
friends.
Yes. And what a gift that is, especially to go all, so far back with you, for you. It's just, I mean, it really is wonderful. Those people have helped shape our lives. They've rescued us from time to time. Even if
Mhm.
it's like 5 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon and you're having a meltdown at work, you can yell via text and say, "Oh, I need something. I need a moment," and they're right there. They come right to your rescue, and that's I know it's trite, but it really is priceless. It has certainly shaped my life, and so yeah, I imagine that you would say the same of your friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, how much research did you have to do for your book, if
Well, this
any?
one,
If
I've had to
any.
do a lot more research for my other books. This book was unique in that the research was much more lively because my friends and they knew I was writing this book, and they were inspiring characters. And so it was long sessions via text or online, or we are still in a book club ourselves. And so, tangents during book club to talk about, oh, what was that bar we used to go to? Or who is that guy who did this? Or and so it was a walk down memory lane, a lot of it. And then the other research was just listening with a different ear to what we really talk about. And those aren't my only girlfriends. I'm lucky enough to have several groups of close girlfriends, and just um, being very mindful about what we talk about, and what our dilemmas are, and how what seems to be common threads among all of us. And so this one was different in that it was really just being, there was the historical part, and then just the really trying to be mindful and listening to the women in my life now.
Hmm.
So
What did they think about them being the stars of the book?
they got to read an early edition, and at first I got some texts from especially one of them who says, "Oh my gosh, am I really this character?" And then she said, "Am I going to hate this character the whole book?" Because her character is a little neurotic at the beginning, and then they read the whole thing through, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you have our blessing," because it rang true. And they know that they're just the basis, the inspiration for the characters. I was very careful to tell them from the very beginning, this this is the spirit of you, but I have to give these characters flaws. I have to give them quirks. I have to make them do dumb things. And those aren't necessarily your flaws or your quirks or your dumb decisions. They have to be complete, full characters. And so, in fact, in the closing acknowledgments, I say all the good stuff is yours. All the bad stuff belongs to fiction. So, yeah, but then it was really fun because my publisher, since I live in Minneapolis and most of my book tours have been around the Midwest, this time though, I lobbied and won their approval to go to California for this one, given that the book is set in San Francisco. And my dear friends who are the inspiration for the book all live there. One lives in the Bay Area, one lives in San Diego. And so I got to go to San Diego and San Francisco and Palm Springs for book tour and have book events. And they came on stage with me to be my in conversation partners. So that was really fun because the audience got to experience their real time reactions, or sometimes we disagree about our memory of things. And they really talked, one of the things they talked about is how different each of us remember certain aspects of that time, because
Ah,
it's just true, the human experience, we all take different things based on, you know, sort of where we are in our lives at that moment from the same experience. And so I think overall, they're okay. Overall, they're okay.
that's incredible. That is wonderful. When you create your characters, in all of your other books, are they usually based on people that you know, or are they totally made up?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Well, my very first book, called Evergreen Tidings from the Baumgartners, has a um, someone described her as imperious. She has there's a very demanding, high expectations mother at the center of the book, and she sort of acts and believes as if she's the PR agent for the entire family. And she writes these extravagant, over the top Christmas letters that are interspersed throughout the novel. And that voice and that woman, or that character, is based on several women. She's a conglomeration of several women that I grew up with. So that voice was in my head almost since childhood, since first memories. Um, but she is the character, besides this new book, who I think is taken most directly from real life. Otherwise, I do think real people always inspire my characters. In a way, I don't feel as if I know a character until I'm able to relate her to other people that I know in
Mhm.
it, not, not directly translated, but, someone who has the skills of this person and the sort of the social personality of this person, maybe the quirks of another. I think I'm a very visual thinker in some ways. And so, I'm constantly looking to TV or movies or my real life acquaintances for just those little touches.
So do you come up with your characters first, or do you come up with the real plots of the stories first? Or is it a
You know, it
combination, really?
it depends on the book. For my second book, the kids are going to ask. That's about 17-year-old twins who start a podcast to find their biological father after their mother is killed in a freak traffic accident, and the podcast goes viral and etc. Um, that plot came to me first. I knew I was actually I was searching around for my next book, and I was watching the news, and sadly it was at the time when the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shootings took place at the high school. And the students rose up and in response and became activists for gun control. And I watched as almost overnight they became a cultural lightning rod. Half of the country was like, absolutely, these kids have been traumatized. We've had enough. And half of the country was, how dare you? What do you know? Who's paying you? And I just thought, what else in the world, or at least in our country, could turn could divide a nation against children. And my answer was sexuality and, um, babies born out of wedlock and paternity and stuff like that. And it's not that I wanted people to attack my characters, but I did want them to feel some of that tension because when the podcast goes viral, they do experience a lot of that. Um, and they learn a lot of things about themselves, but also about the culture at large and like the publicity machine and everything as a result. I'm really proud of that book, to be honest. If I can take it just a second to
Yeah.
talk about it, because um,
What's the name of the what's the name of the book
the
again?
the kids are going to ask, and
Okay.
it came out at the worst time for a book to ever come out, July 2020. And it was, and I live in Minneapolis, and so not only were we in the middle of the pandemic, but and lockdown, but George Floyd had just been murdered, and my hometown was on fire, and so we were reeling from a number of things at the same time. And here comes this little book of mine out into the world. And, it's still just sort of tiptoes through the world. But about 8 months later, I was invited to a Zoom with my editor. And lo and behold, I enter the Zoom and it's a committee from the American Library Association, and they had awarded it a big annual award, the Alex Award for adult novels
Wow.
that can be read by young adults and speak to young adult issues as well as they speak to adult issues. And I was just flabbergasted. And so even if it hadn't won the award, I would have been proud of that book. But I'm just so glad that somebody saw it, and understood it, and it was meaningful to the small group of people who read it. But you can't. That's one of the hardest things to get used to as being a writer, is that you can never control what happens to the book once you let it out into the world. You just
That's
can't. You can't predict
definitely
what people are
true.
going to think and how they're going to react and whether they pay attention at all or whether they give it fully the wrong attention. Luckily, that's never happened to me, but you know, so, and
Right,
that's a lesson
right.
I have to continue to learn with every book that comes out.
Or if it gets banned or
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
nowadays.
That's happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's happened to a lot of my friends who just don't understand it at all.
I
So,
know exactly.
yeah.
So, um, let's getting back to Tired Ladies Take a Stand.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what what made you write that book? What was the actual inspiration? I know it was your relationship with your friends, but what was the actual inspiration for writing that book?
I had always wanted to fictionalize or maybe write essays on that year of yes that we had because they shaped each of our lives so fundamentally. And I know there are lots of people who have done something similar, whatever they call it. Um, but so I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to tell that story. And then it came time to write this fourth book, and it felt like maybe it was time. Maybe I developed my audience enough. Maybe I was confident enough as a writer to be able to tell it. And then as it turned out, when I was talking through it with my agent and my editor, we decided that yes, there was a lot of story in that year in our late 20s, but the conflict in the story actually comes from the difference between what it's like in your 20s and what it's like now. And so the book itself is actually a book within a book. The chapters about the women in their early days are written as essays. One of the characters in the book is a writer, and she's written several books of essays over the years, and they've done okay. And she writes a book called of essays called Smart Ladies Say Yes, and it is about that year of yes that she and her friends had. And, it's been out for about 8 years when the book opens, and she learns that someone has found it at a used bookstore and a pair of TikTokers, and they read it and they got such a kick out of the crazy things that they did that they started recreating them in TikTok videos, and the videos caught on, and so the book was getting a whole second life. And so it was fun for me as a writer because I got to write in essay style, and I got to write as straight up fiction, which is, it's different. It pulls on different parts of your writer's brain, and so it was an interesting uh, experience and exercise
Hmm.
from that perspective for me. But as far as timing, I just felt like it was the second book in a two-book contract, and I thought, well, I'm going to pitch it. Maybe they'll take it, and they did.
Ah, okay. Um, so when you write, are you a pantser or an outliner?
I am uh, a loose outliner, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that I have to do, and it stems from knowing my characters, is I have to do quite a bit of character development beforehand, before I start writing, in order to just even be able to put words in their mouth. I have to feel like I know their motivation, I know what they want, and once I figure out the dramatic stuff about who, because books aren't plots so much as they are journeys for the characters inside. The plots are mechanisms for these characters to learn and grow in the ways they need to over the course of the story. And so once I feel like I have a kind of an idea of what this character needs, then that from that flows the plot. And once I get a feel of the plot, I take several stabs at like at least drawing out the beats, the high level beats of the story, like the inciting incident and the no turning back and the climax and things like that. Um, and then when it's time to start to write, I do scene sketches before, usually at the beginning of the week, so that it's much less frightening for me to sit down to to a blank page if I have like a sketch of what's happening in the scene, what I'm trying to convey, what needs, how it drives the plot forward, that type of thing. And sometimes, even for the first draft, sometimes I just cut and paste out of that sketch of a scene, and I put it as a sentence in my draft, and it just allows me to keep going. It's like I don't know, it's like the grease in the wheels for me. So
Hmm.
I don't I know generally where the story is going to go, but if I do too many of those scene sketches too far ahead, the books change, and they
Mm.
you know they have their own, the story is in you, but it isn't necessarily all there right away. It's as you write and you continue to explore these characters that the story emerges more and more. So I'm of the philosophy that I need to listen to the story. And if I were to write those scene sketches all the way to the end of the book, inevitably, and I have tried past books, and inevitably they just change so much by the time I get there that it's only really worth it to only write them like three or four ahead at a time.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense. I understand exactly what you mean. Excuse me. Okay. What was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out Tired Ladies Take a Stand?
Yeah, the biggest challenge in writing it was it took me quite it's unexpectedly long time to distance myself from the real people who inspired the characters, and to be able to create fictional characters out of them. Even though I had, you know, constructed these fictional characters in my head um, for many months, I have to say, I just plotted through the writing because I couldn't shake the real voices of the real people out of my head. And that's okay up to an extent, but it becomes halting. It becomes problematic when you can't imagine the real person doing what the fictional character needs to do. Then it gets in the way. And so it was quite an exercise to try and to eventually like be able to separate the character from the person. But eventually I got there. But it was that was the biggest challenge. Um, and
Okay.
then tell me the second. Oh, releasing the book. What was the biggest challenge in releasing the book? It's noisy right now. It's really noisy with the election and weather and um, even though the book has gotten good reception, it's not flying across the internet. It's not popping up in your Amazon feed, stuff like that. So and it's not just me saying that. Every author I've talked to who had a book out recently is saying the same thing. It's really noisy. It's really hard to get any traction right now just because the world is distracted.
Definitely
So
true. Good point.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So, what character did you love or hate the most?
in this book,
Yes. I know it's
ooh.
hard for you to say because they're based on real
Okay,
people.
so I will say that I do love a book with a very quirky character. Like I loved Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine because Eleanor is just such a she's hard to love and hard to dislike at the same time. I love a character like that. And my character in Evergreen Tidings from the Baumgartners, my central character, is a lot like that. She's very divisive. Um, and you have to get all the way to the end of the book until she really humanizes herself. And then people are like, oh, now I get it. So my books all tend to have a character like that just because I'm so drawn to them. And in this book, there's a very difficult future mother-in-law. One of the characters, Emma, is on the heels of a very tough divorce, and she's still kind of reeling from that. And her only daughter is getting married, and she just wants to be able to help her daughter plan a wedding and enjoy the wedding. And she ends up getting um, sort of taking frontline responsibility for the interaction with a high maintenance mother-in-law, future mother-in-law, a very high maintenance future mother-in-law. And so those, I can't say I loved the character because she's really hard to love, but it was very fun to write her scenes.
Okay.
And I do also love putting a character in there that she makes all your other characters look better. Like my characters are all flawed and they do dumb things and they make dumb decisions and they don't always treat each other well because they're human, right? We do that as humans. But I love to insert a character who is just makes them look great right after they've made a big mistake or, in a book that otherwise it just humanizes them, I think. And so this mother-in-law is a very um, useful character for humanizing the four women of the story.
Okay. So, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
I wish I knew. I am working on I know. I am working on a book right now, but it's a baby book. It's not a book for babies. It's just like in its tiny little infancy. And if I talk about it too much, it's gonna get scared and run away. But I do know that I've been watching a lot of commercials from the mid 70s, and I've been watching a lot of Mary Tyler Moore show and getting inspiration from that mid 70s vibe for this one. So it might be a throwback book or a nostalgia book this time around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. So now I have some questions for you about being a writer. What's your
Okay.
favorite part? what's your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Meeting readers. Yeah, meeting readers. I love interacting with book clubs. If anybody reads my book and they want to have me attend their book club, just go to my website, gretchenanthony.com, and you can contact me there. I do. I've done probably 100 book clubs to this point because I really like them. It's easy to zoom in. And the thing I love about it is that readers have such interesting questions. They have such interesting observations and interpretations that I wouldn't get otherwise. You know, they ask me questions about things that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise because writing is such a solitary act.
Right.
It's just me and the voices in my head and the keyboard, you know, and it's like this loop. And of course you get feedback from your editor and your agent and your beta readers and all that. And that's wonderful. But they're experiencing the book as in a technical sense. But your readers, especially like book clubs who are reading it intending to discuss it with others, they are experiencing it as as a full story. And they take time to assess it and decide if they relate to it and think about the things that happen to the characters and in the plot. And it's so interesting to me. It's the most fulfilling part. Yeah, it's the most fulfilling part.
Okay. And what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, I got invited. So there's a winery up in um, uh, the Niagara region of Canada. There's a whole bunch of wineries there. I wasn't
Mhm.
super aware of it, but now I am. And there's a winery up there who chose a couple of my books for their wine and book club. They send out, it's a paid service. They send out a book and then a couple of bottles of wine, I think, kind of accompany it. And then they have a discussion every month. And they had read a couple of mine and I zoomed into them and that was very fun. And then last year they invited me out and my husband and I got to go up to the winery and be there in person and went to Niagara Falls and all that stuff. And spent a lovely Sunday afternoon in September in the middle of the vineyard, looking
Nice.
out at all the grapes and all, you know, this crowd full of readers who again had great questions and great insight. And it was, yeah, that's something that you don't expect, but I sure do appreciate.
That's great. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
I would hope I've learned humility. It's just, you know, to go with it. It's journey that you have so little control over. And yet it's one of, I consider it one of the biggest honors of my life to be able to do this. Um, I love being a mom. I have three kids. They all turned out great. I love my family and my husband and the life we've created. And on top of that, I get to do something that I dreamed of my whole life. And as vulnerable as it is, I try to remember what a blessing, what a great thing it is just to be able to do this. And I don't cease to ever marvel at the fact that people are interested in reading my silly my silly little stories. Um, but it's a very vulnerable pursuit at the same time. And so you just, you know, you're kind of reminded all the time that you might not be as great as you imagined it you were, or, you know, um, no, you're good. You're good. You're okay. You know, doesn't matter that someone gave your audiobook a one because they didn't like the narrator. You can't control that. You know, just keep going where your heart is pulling you. So yeah.
So, your books
My
have been turned
parents,
into
everybody.
audiobooks too, huh?
Yeah, they're all available as audiobooks. And
Yeah.
I don't agree. I don't agree that the narrators are terrible. I think the narrators are great for the record.
All right. So, what piece of advice would you want to give to other writers that might, you know, that you might not have mentioned already?
Hmm. Well, I get a lot of the number one question I get from um, people who feel like they have a book in them that they want to write is the same advice that I learned the hard way myself. I had a whole full corporate career before this in corporate communication and consulting, where all I did was write all day for executives and initiatives and all that stuff. So I thought, of course, I'm going to, of course, I'll be able to write these books that I feel I have inside me. I'm writing all day anyway. But what I didn't do was I never forced myself to sit down at the computer every day and put words on the page. And that is what it takes. It takes butt in chair time. Um,
Mhm.
and if it's 200 words a day, 500 words a day, I try to hit 1,000 or more every day when I'm in drafting mode. That's what it takes. You just have to put your butt in the chair and do it. I heard this thing today by a guy online who was saying, wouldn't it be great if you could send your kid or your best friend to the gym for you and you got all the benefits? And, and he was using it as a metaphor for writing. Wouldn't it be great if you could, enjoy all the benefits without doing any of the work? And you just can't. So, and then my other advice is just try and fall into the story and enjoy the story because you are the first person who gets to see it and hear it and imagine it. J. Ryan Straddle is he's a wonderful author and he's become a friend of mine. He's been very supportive of my work and blurbed my first three books. And he I've done several events with him and he almost gets this like dreamy look on his face when he talks about the writing experience because he talks about being able to fall in to this world every day and live in it and experience it. And that really, to hear him say that so many times and so honestly, reshaped my experience because I used to get really anxious, like, oh, the scene has to be good. The scene has to, what am I trying to say? And now, especially with drafting this new book, um, I've tried to look at it as a bit of an escape. Okay, it's the world is a tough place. All have worries. We're all hot, but I get to fall into this world for a little while and see where it takes me. So,
Okay. Are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you might have helped you in your career that you'd recommend to other writers?
yeah, I did a lot of work with the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis, which is a fantastic organization for writers. And they do uh, a lot of virtual classes now too. So you can take classes through Loft anywhere. And the teachers are outstanding and the support is outstanding. And I met my writing group partners there. So I think it's loftliterary.org, if I'm not mistaken. Um, yeah, I took my first novel through I took many classes there, but I took my first novel through a master class there. And ended up, I had several hundred pages of a novel written when I brought it into the class and learned from along the experience that that book had taught me everything it was supposed to teach me. And it was time to go in the drawer and start something new, which when I first heard that, I was like, but the feedback was absolutely right. And that's where I started Evergreen Tidings from the Bone Partners, which became my debut. So yeah, the Loft is if you just want to take a 4 hour class and get an idea of what it might be like, or if you want to take a year-long class, they're all available. And it's really fabulous.
Wonderful. Now I have questions about you as a person. What is one thing that
Ah,
most people don't realize about you?
oh, they don't realize I describe myself as shy and as an introvert, which is true. And people maybe cut, I do like talking to people, and I do speaking events, and I get up in front of a room and love to tell stories and make people laugh and be interactive and fun. And then I go home and I collapse. Oh my gosh. And I have to go into a dark closet for a little while because I've just expended all of my social energy and I need to regenerate. And so when I say that I'm shy and I'm an introvert, people are like, what? But it's true, introversion isn't that you don't like people. It's just that, you need quiet and alone time to, regenerate your energy. So yeah, I
Okay.
would say that.
So what is or are your hobbies or passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time to do the things that you love?
I am great at making free time. Doesn't mean that I don't feel guilty while I'm doing it, but my kids are so much older now and we have so much more free time. Let's see. We have a lake place. And so I love to be on the water. I love to go kayaking and just sit by the water and read in the summer. And then I love to hike um, and spent time with my California friends last summer doing um, hiking in Mammoth. And we used to live in Colorado, so I hit the mountains a lot. And now it's just Minnesota has great state parks and great neighborhood trails. We're wooded and we're outdoor enthusiasts, even in the winter. So I love to hike in the summer and snowshoe in the winter. And um, there's nothing like curling up and reading a book either. There's nothing like it. Or crawling around in a used bookstore like we were talking about before the show, a bookstore like
Yes,
yours, going
right.
treasure hunting.
Absolutely. All right. So, what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing? Like, for example, what do you need to have to drink or eat?
Yeah, I always have water. And I try not to snack so much while I'm eating because otherwise I would snack myself into a coma. Um, but yeah, coffee and water. The thing about my writing space is no matter where I am, my desk has to face a window. I have to be facing out. I don't know if it's like a feng shui thing or a subliminally. If I face a wall, it closes me off creatively and it just makes me feel penned in. So I have to
Mhm.
be facing a window. And I used to have the office in our house and there were, we had two desks in there and my husband had another desk in there, which he used, to like just on weekends and stuff when he was working on stuff at home. But then the pandemic hit and he had to move home and he's on conference calls like it's just 8 out of 9 hours a day. And so writing is not conducive to listening to your IT husband on conference calls. So I moved up into a loft space, an open loft space in our house. And I thought that it would be temporary because it's very open. I don't know if you can see, like, it's just, it's open to our hallway and our bedrooms and stuff. And I thought it would be too distracting and it's actually great. I kind of like having life moving around me while I'm writing. I don't know why. I just put on noise canceling headphones and I go and I think part of it too is that I'm always accessible to my kids. They know where they can find me. I haven't locked myself away in the office with the door closed. Um, and they're older, if they were little tiny, that might be more problematic, but now it's good. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And when you're writing, do you prefer music or silence? And if you like music, what kind?
Yeah, I like silence. Sometimes I do the ambient noise. But often I find it distracting. The one exception to that though is that because my last book takes place in the late 90s, but portions of it does. Um, I made this playlist of all the hit songs and all my favorite songs back from that time and time in my life. And as I was editing and doing rewrites on the book, it helped me to have that on in the background because it put me, from a sensory perspective, it helped put me back into that mindset of where I was in my late 20s, driving the freeways in San Francisco.
Right, right. Writers very often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them with their work. And do you have any, and do they help or hinder you?
Yeah, I do have one, Winnie the Poodle. She is a standard poodle. Yeah, I have to give all my dogs literary names. Our former dog Loki used to lay at my feet. He got me through my first three books. It was just he's so sweet before we lost him. But Winnie, Winnie loves to bark at anything that moves. So she's locked in the bedroom right now, and she's very mad at me. Otherwise, she lays. I have a tiny little settee couch in the loft up here with me, and she lays and watches me.
She
I
watches you.
practice. Yeah.
So she does not hinder you, she just watches you.
Yeah. 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 Unless the only time she gets in my way is like when I'm trying to do this kind of thing and she decides to go nuts because someone's walking their dog outside the
And not paying
house.
attention to her.
Yes. Yes.
My cats are like that.
It's so funny.
Oh,
It's so
yeah.
funny.
So I just have two more questions for you.
Sure.
Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I need to mention Annie's and say that people can get Gretchen's work if they call us at 508-796-5613 or email us at 50 email us at orders at anniesbooksworcester.com at orders at anniesbooksworcester.com. And anyways, where else can people find your books?
My books are available everywhere. So I would prefer that you buy it from Annie's or from your local bookstore, or you can get signed copies from my hometown bookstore, which is majorsandquinn.com. They've been fantastic and supportive, very supportive of my work over the years. Or, go to bookshop and help a local bookstore that way. But first, I think they should go to Annie's.
Thank you. And my last question for you is how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Thank you. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram at GretchenAnthony.writer. Social media is not my best friend, but I do try to be, a little bit, I try to be on there, every week and at least be a little bit engaging or humorous, bring some light to the day. Or you can find me at my website, which is GretchenAnthony.com. And I've got a newsletter and I've got, yeah, you can, my books are for sale there. You can reach out about book clubs or events or all that stuff. So yeah, you can find me there. Oh, I'm on Facebook at the same, GretchenAnthony.writer.
All right. Great. Well, thank you so much, Gretchen.
Yeah,
It's been a
thank
pleasure talking
you.
to you. It's been a lot of fun.
Good, good.
And anyway, so maybe sometime you'll get to Boston area or Worcester area. It's not Boston, it's Worcester.
It's Worcester. Yeah,
It's Worcester.
exactly.
Um, it's central Massachusetts.
I would love to. I would love to. Yes. We were in Boston 2 years ago. So now I need to go back and instead of going to Boston, go to Worcester.
Great. Gretchen Anthony, thanks very much.
Oh, thank you so much. This is really fun.